Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn, and this is the 10 by 9 podcast. How lovely to be back with 3 more amazing true stories. These were told at our event in Belfast, Black Box, in November when the theme was fall. What a mix of stories, and what an amazing night.
Over the rest of the weekend, we had some hashish, we did some belly dancing, and John French kissed a granny.
Astonishingly, she was the aunt of David and Richard Attenborough, the 2 suit-clad visitors I had seen years before.
If laziness was an event in the Commonwealth Games, he'd have purposely come in 4th so he wouldn't have to walk to the podium.
As they say, if you were there, you were there. But hey, you can relive it, almost, with this trio of gentlemen and their wonderful takes, some rather tenuous to be fair, on that theme, fall. Let's get going then with the first of our storytellers. Here's Richard Brown.
In the autumn of 1984, that's the connection, that's it, that's all you're getting. I was a 20-year-old living a rather raucous, irresponsible life in London, working in bars and restaurants in Sloane Square, tolerating the custom of the hooray Henry and the city boys who frequented these establishments. The King's Road was my favourite haunt, loud music, lively bars, punks, new romantics and everything in between. For a young lad from Limavady, this was a place of very few boundaries and endless possibilities. Travel agents' windows were festooned with ultraviolet splash signs advertising all sorts of holidays with thick black marker. Discover the culture and landscape of Fez and Tangiers. This sounded promising. Bustling souks, intoxicating aromas of herbs and spices along the labyrinth of alleys in Morocco. Yes, very inviting indeed. A meeting was organised, and without much thought or discussion, tickets were purchased and a date circled in the calendar. John, a friend from Port Ballantrae, had been by my side through most scrapes and near misses, of which there have been many. Ben, the son of an English vicar, a recent acquisition, had made us a trio. He had impressed us with his puppy dog enthusiasm and his appetite for adventure. He could also keep up with our excessive drinking, and that only the people from this island fully understand. The trip would prove to be a demanding test for his stamina and his overall view of the Irishman abroad. The night before our flight to Morocco, we had gone to a bar, a warm-up if you will. After all, we were officially on holiday. Ben lived with his uncle, who was away at the time, so this was an obvious place to crash. Before we would leave at 4 a.m, take the train from Victoria Station and on to the airport. At a very sensible 10 p.m, Ben called it a night, but not before packing his bag, checking his passport and other travel paraphernalia. John and I took a more laissez-faire approach and sat downstairs finishing off what beers we had, refusing to carry out any form of due diligence or travel checklist. After all, we were seasoned travellers. John had been to Cavan. And I'd been to Donegal and stayed in a caravan. Phileas Fogg himself would be no match. Instead, we started on the creme de menthe, the lamb's rum, the Advocate and the Baileys, unknowingly provided by Ben's uncle. And although we had never met, we believed he was of good stock and would understand the plight. By 12 a.m, we were right royally pissed. And John, well, he was virtually unplayable. We were looking for mischief, and as it would happen, exposed an early chink in Ben's armour. I had spied Ben's suitcase at the front door, a medium brown leather rectangular case from the 1950s. This would be his undoing and a fall from grace. We investigated to see exactly what does an Englishman, son of a vicar, travel abroad with. 3 pairs of pants, the same. 2 vests, the same. 2 blue shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, 1 pair of khaki trousers, swimwear, a wash bag, and open-toe sandals. This man was an obvious psychopath and could not be trusted. And this is where I believe the Irishman's drinking mind and the Englishman's thinking take very different paths. We decided to discard most of the items from Ben's well-thought-out case contents and spice things up a little. 4 a.m. arrived very abruptly, and we were woken by Ben pleading with us to get up. When Ben was stressed, he took on the persona of a character lifted straight from the Enid Blyton novel. "Chaps, you slept in and you must get a move on. Our flight shall be missed. Please, chaps, you must." I pulled Blanket and John to the floor. A time check demanded that we split the cost of a taxi and make haste to the airport. During the 45-minute journey, I sat opposite Ben in the black cab. He clutched onto his bag as though the contents were highly valued. Possibly needing delivered to an olive-skinned beauty in Tangiers, but only after the correct communication made could these bags be exchanged. The eagle flies at dawn, but the monkey eats the custard. I smiled to myself, the lamb's rum obviously still coursing through my veins. It was then that I did notice a few oddities about our agent Ben. "Ben, have you had a shave?" "Yes," he responded. "Have you had a shower?" Again, yes. "Ben, what time did you get up at?" "Oh, about 3 a.m., he replied perkily. John and I looked at each other for a second as this information percolated. We both looked over at Ben. John went to speak. I took his arm and stopped him. After all, it was I who had unearthed this quarry. "So, Ben, did it not occur to you to wake us up as well?" Ben mumbled something about us drinking his uncle's alcohol and that this was poor show. "Listen, Ben, all great explorers quaff copious amounts of alcohol before they head out on an expedition. Hillary, Shackleton, Livingston, all loved a boozy, bottomless lunch before an adventure." Ben shook his head, unconvinced by my defence. "Irish pigs," he snorted. John and I reached over, ruffled his hair vigorously, gave him a dead arm and a Chinese bird for his trouble. Sat back in our seats, and we all continued on our journey, joking and jibing. We arrived at the airport with only just enough time to check in and run to the gate. We boarded, and as soon as we'd taken off and the bar was open, we ordered double Bacardis and Coke until we'd worked off our hangovers, and the day ahead suddenly seemed far more manageable. The flight was uneventful, and we arrived in Morocco in high spirits and ready for adventure. We collected our bags, headed through customs. John and I passed security, unaware that Ben had been pulled aside. We looked back for him and watched as he presented his bag onto a table for inspection. It never really occurred to us that he would be stopped entering the country. We thought we would get to the hotel for the big reveal. This was indeed a bonus. The security guard turned the bag around, popped the 2 clasps and lifted the lid. He glanced down into the bag, looked over the lid at Ben and asked, had he packed the case himself? Ben nodded vigorously. The guard first pulled an A4 sheet of paper off the inside of the lid and handed it to Ben. He blushed as he read, "My name is Ben and I'm a big ride." He scanned the hall and locked eyes with us. Then the look of horror washed over his face as the security guard started to set out the contents of his bag. 1 large black Wellington boot. 1 sink plunger. 1 naked action man. We thought it being naked would have more impact. 1 framed picture of Vera Duckworth. We'd replaced the picture of his uncle and a rather mangy-looking dog with a picture of Vera we cut out from the Radio Times. 1 family-sized jar of Vaseline. The security guard opened the jar, looked inside and grimaced at the contents. We decided to add Rice Krispies and hair from a brush. 1 pair of yellow marigold gloves, 1 small frying pan. A trophy his uncle had won in a darts competition at his local pub, the Lamb and Flag. 1 VHS tape with a recording of Lovejoy Series 3, and in my opinion, Ian McShane's finest work. 1 tin of Heinz beans, and finally a few towels to muffle the sound of said contents. Although confused and bewildered by these contents, there was no illegal contraband and Ben was allowed to pass through security and rejoin us. Believe it or not, this prank was not the thing that bewildered Ben the most. Once we got to the hotel and we began to unpack our bags, he asked, "Where's my stuff?" John and I thought this a rather odd question. We shrugged our shoulders and both said, "London." Ben looked completely astonished. He said he kind of got the element of repacking his bag, but not to bring his contents in our bags, completely beyond him. To reassure Ben, we informed him there were plenty of markets and stalls with knock-off clothing. "We will dress you like a king." Over the rest of the weekend, we had some hashish. We did some belly dancing. And John French kissed a granny. We did indeed dress Ben like a king, the King of Morocco, with robes and tassels, a fez, a bush slippers that turned beautifully up at the ends. And on our last night, the hotel held a Moroccan evening feast, and Ben looked magnificent. So much so, he was presented with the Best Dressed Man of the Evening award by the Hotel Compare. The trophy, of course, was won from a darts competition his uncle won in 1983.
I really don't know what to say, Richard. Hilarious and yet awful at the same time. That poor Englishman. Thanks, though, for giving us all a laugh, even if it was a bit of a tenuous connection to the theme. If, like Richard, you want to tell your story at 10 by 9, the process is simple. Check out the themes on the website, then send your story through the submissions page. I'll give you feedback and help you make it the best it can be. If you're nervous, don't worry, nerves are good, and the 10 by 9 audience is the best and most supportive there is. Now, just before moving on to our second story, I want to say a big hello to all our followers in China. Yep, China. I check our website metrics regularly, so it was quite a surprise to see that our #1 territory this past month, according to Squarespace, was the People's Republic. We'd long had a follower or two, but this past month we had more than 1,000 people living in China visiting our website. So, that's wonderful. It's great to have you, and maybe there'll be a 10 by 9 Beijing before too long. Okay, on to our second story on this podcast, and it was a delight to have him back at the Black Box. Here's Bob Salisbury, but let me explain his opening remarks. The storyteller before him had a gorgeous accent from the American South, which I commented on, so this was Bob's response.
Evening, everyone. I'm always getting slagged for my accent from my wife anyway, so...
One just tries to improve it.
Anyway, Rosemary, love of my life, mentor, inspiration, and wife for over 50 years, always says that I never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I have to say often it's true. I take the view that any good tale is worthy of a little enhancement, and I've noticed a few storytellers here at 10 by 9 who think the same. Sometimes, though, the absolute truth is stranger than any fiction you could possibly write. Tonight's story is one of those. It's totally factual. There's no enhancement, no poetic license, just word for word exactly as it happened. And oddly, that's perhaps the thing that, to me, makes it so unbelievable. A bit of background. We came to Ireland in 2001. Rosemary was principal of a large secondary school in England when she received a letter from an old favourite teacher in Omagh telling her the integrated college there needed somebody of her ability to give it a kick up the backside. I was running a national scheme for training future school leaders, principals that is, at the time, and it didn't matter where I was based. Our 3 sons had moved off for study or careers, so we felt 4 or 5 years in Ireland would be an interesting change. Our 200-year-old cottage on the edge of Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood country, sold immediately, And though we tried to buy a house in Tyrone, we couldn't find anything suitable, and an estate agent suggested we should just build a house, as planning was easy and costs relatively low. It was then that fate intervened. 5 acres of what you might call boggy pasture land came up for sale. This was part of a much larger farm owned by Rosemary's father. He'd been killed in a tractor accident when she was 18 months old, and the land thereafter had been largely neglected. But we liked the notion of getting even a small part of it back into the family ownership. It was when we were planning where to position the house that Rosemary said, "You know, that's strange. This land used to be alive with lapwings and curlew and many small birds and butterflies, and I've seen nothing moving. Where on earth has all the wildlife gone? We seem to have bought a rural desert." And her idea, she said, perhaps we should try and turn the clock back by making this land more attractive to wildlife. But the notion of rewilding then wasn't fashionable. And though we had little knowledge of biodiversity, no understanding of how to design a wildlife area, and no spare cash because we had to build a house, we did have a dream and decided to give it a go. As naive as we were, amazingly, the project worked. We expanded the area to 17 acres, planted 8,000 trees, dug 3 lakes, made wildflower meadows, and birds, mammals, and insects returned in numbers. What started as a crazy idea eventually won the award for the best environmental project in the whole of Ireland, promoted television and radio programs, and became a fairly unique case study. Walking around the place at this time of year with the autumnal colours, the arrival of the winter wildfowl and the occasional otter always raises the spirits. I don't know why, but these sights somehow make the unsettled world we live in now feel a little safer, a little more predictable. We both feel that all of the effort in making this happen has been fully worthwhile. But tonight's not the time to go into details about this rewilding. If you want to know more about it and how it came about, read the book Field of Dreams, Blackstaff Press. We need the royalties. The cost of peanuts and birdseed these days. That last sentence is an example of exaggeration and enhancement, what I was talking about earlier, because as you know, you make very little from writing a book. But to understand why I feel this is a truly incredible story, we need to go back in time to make the link. I was brought up in Stapleford, a small, nondescript industrial town a few miles from Nottingham. 2 doors down from me was an elderly lady called Maudie. She was a close friend of my grandmother who lived with it in her later years. Maudie and Grandma met most days for a bun, a cup of tea and a chat. Sometimes in our house, sometimes in hers. Maudie was clearly an educated woman, but her speech was slightly impaired with a hare lip. Grandmother said that's why Maudie remained a spinster. One day when I was about 12, I was on the street kicking a football about when a car rolled up. The arrival of any vehicle was quite an event, and this was even more so when 2 men got out, dressed in suits, and went into Maudie's. I thought they must be detectives or lawyers or something. "Are you in trouble?" I asked Maudie the next day. "I saw the men in suits." "No, they are my 2 nephews from Leicester, just visiting. They're both doing very well." Some years after that, I left my hometown for study and work, and when Maudie died, my mother sent me her obituary from the local newspaper. To say I was astounded when I read it was an understatement. Maudie's real name was Marjorie, and her surname, which I'm sure I never knew, was Attenborough. Astonishingly, she was the aunt of David and Richard Attenborough, the two suit-clad visitors I had seen years before. I was aware through Wikipedia or internet or somewhere that their father, Frederick, had been brought up a few streets from me in Stapleford, but I never connected the dots with his sister Marjorie. The tale doesn't end there. Just before we moved to Ireland, we had a clear-out of many of the books we had in the study, and I came across my grandmother's old Bible. Inside, in beautiful handwriting, were several notes. Hope you get over the cold. Have a good birthday. Simple human messages, all signed by her good friend Marjorie Attenborough. The plot thickens. Late September this year, we'd been away on holiday for a week, and I was discarding the junk mail on our return when I came across a handwritten letter amongst the usual rubbish. Inside, in slightly shaky handwriting and a couple of crossings out, was a message which said, among other things, "It must be very satisfying to have started an ecosystem from scratch and for it to become so successful and influential. Congratulations and very well done." It stopped me dead in my tracks, not simply because someone had been kind enough to take the time to write, but because of who the writer was. I called Rosemary, and her reaction was just like mine. We both stood speechless, staring at the letter in front of us. The signature at the bottom of that was one of the most famous faces in the world, and a person who next May will be 100 years old, Sir David Attenborough. So I grew up next to his aunt without knowing it, saw David and Richard visit their aunt without knowing who they were, had no idea that there were notes from his Auntie Marjorie in Grandma's Bible, and finally had no thought whatsoever that we would get a personal handwritten note for our small project in Tyrone from a man who's probably done more than any human being to make us rethink how we are treating our planet and the creatures in it. We now have it framed in our hall with his aunt's notes tucked in behind the letter. But you couldn't make it up, could you? Sometimes the truth is indeed stranger than fiction.
Bob, thank you so much. What a beautiful story, and what a lovely intervention from Rosemary at the beginning. By the way, Bob's book, Field of Dreams, is still available to buy online if you need a Christmas present for a nature-loving friend. Now, just a quick thank you to all of you who keep 10 by 9 going with your donations. Some of you give via Patreon, and some of you have donated to StoryPig at our live events over the years. Either way, thank you. 10 by 9 is always free and always will be, so it really helps to keep us going. If you're interested in helping out, just go to Patreon or make a one-off donation via PayPal using our email address. Okay, that's the money bit done and dusted. On to our third story in this podcast, and it comes from our recent arrival at 10 by 9, who's quickly becoming a firm favourite. He's a ball of energy. Here's Houdi McCabe.
Help me out, yeah, you know you gotta help me out, yeah, don't put me on the back burner, you gotta help me out. Well, that's what it's supposed to sound like. Brandon Flowers from The Killers was with me as I drove home from the Odyssey Arena at Belfast. This was a sample lyric from All These Things That I Have Done, a track from their smash-hit debut album, Hot Fuss. I certainly didn't feel like Mr. Brightside after what happened an hour earlier. I wish that someone had told me beforehand. Not that I was a great listener back then. In 2004, I was the man with testicles bigger than the tuberous bush cricket. Not that long ago, graduated as a mature student in Queen's University, having studied part-time, first in my year, and prize winner at all stages of the programme, the only candidate to achieve distinction at all exams, modules, projects, and dissertation in 30 years of the course. I was an MSc in communication, specialising in change management. I was some man for one man. Not finished yet. Branch manager of a department store in Mid-Ulster that won the Hygiene Store of the Year. The icing on the proverbial cake arrived when I was asked to MC the company conference to mark the occasion of the retailer achieving the £2 billion turnover for the first time. This was in tandem with privately building a substantial property portfolio as a side project with my stunning wife, Carol, who wouldn't come tonight. I was the father of 3 adorable children who also weren't here, living in a new spacious bungalow on the north coast. Not bad for a scallywag from County Monaghan who just about scraped his leaving cert. Did I mention that I had a brand new Honda Accord? Oh, indeed, I was the man back then in 2004. Anyway, my department manager, Mervyn Ballantyne, announced he was leaving the company to seek other opportunities that were more sympathetic to his skill set and competencies. I felt like opening a bottle of Moet and Shanton. I was that glad to see the back of him. The only thing sympathetic to his skill set was a 15-ton steamroller, which was likely to catch him as he had the energy of a 3-toed sloth. If laziness was an event in the Commonwealth Games, he'd have purposely come in 4th so he wouldn't have to walk to the podium. His personal hygiene was an environmental catastrophe. The single suit he possessed carried a sell-by date as it had more food on it than the salad bar. It was ironic that he spent half his day packing out cosmetics and deodorants, never thinking he should try a sample. I was convinced if he met our environmental health officer on a store visit, she would issue a prohibition notice within the hour. Anyway, they're having a collection for Big Mervyn. There's a night out in Belfast organised, announced Lindsay, my HR manager, melancholically because she would have to cover his late night shifts and donate 20 quid to his valedictory gift. Why does he want to go to Belfast? He only lives a few miles down the road, he asked. Detecting a hesitancy in her voice, she went on to explain. They're taking him to a topless bar. I think it's in the Odyssey Arena. I swallowed hard, picturing him like an obese American, inserting a tenner in a red garter. I never considered him a womanizer. He was that fond of his food. His definition of oral sex was listening to a Lebanese waiter talk through the specials. I won't be going to any topless bar, I assertively told her. But the company will want you to go there to make sure all the managers behave. They know you're a teetotal. Lindsay, watch my lips. I won't be going to a topless bar because those poor girls are smuggled for exploitation. Regardless of that, I'm the convener of Portrush Presbyterian Church Finance and Staff Committee. I'd be sent to the walk of shame with Carol waiting at the last step of the sharpening stone. The regional manager, Mr. McBurney, rang me a short time later. Lindsay must have touted on my recalcitrance. He was also personally celebrating the announcement of Mervyn's departure as he made a faux pas by employing the chocolate fire guard. Mr. McCabe, the company feel you need to attend the night out in Belfast in case the boys cause any trouble. They'll behave with you about the place. I don't know why you don't want to go, because you can always enjoy the crack. Of course I enjoy the crack, but I don't want to go to a place that uses girls who were trafficked, exploited, paid buttons, and probably have their passports withheld. The company want you to go was the last thing I heard before the phone went dead. Being the company man and veritable sycophant, I acquiesced. On the following Saturday night, I found myself in the car park of the Odyssey Arena, the home of the Belfast Giants hockey team. The venue had a cluster of nightclubs and restaurants within its belly. The managers were all pleased that I had attended, rewarding me with a seat beside the departing human Dynamo Mervyn as his guest of honour. I was pleased to see he was wearing a shirt that was less than 5 years old. Eventually, several young waitresses appeared in dresses that wouldn't have kept a loose head on a yard brush. But strangely, they looked and sounded local. They gave us menus that I couldn't read, but food choices that seemed from another planet. So to avoid further embarrassment, I just asked the three-toed sloth to order from me, as unlike him, I wasn't an epicure. Also, there was no music in the venue, which I considered weird for a topless bar, having watched The Sopranos. The meal was in 6 courses with a 2-hour period, with all the dishes served in small plates. It was like everything was a starter. The concept was a new departure for me, forcing me to concede that I needed to get out more. Later, another manager, Barry, sat beside me to ascertain how I was enjoying the night. I had to admit it was a great evening, especially as everyone was behaving. I was a bit concerned about how long we were going to be there. Barry, what time do the girls come on and the music? What girls, Houdi? The pole dancers, the topless girls. Why would they be pole dancers, Houdi? Assuming he was gormless, I slagged him off. Flip's sake, Barry, it's in the name! Topless bar, duh! His face contorted like a plastic bottle being sucked by a vacuum cleaner, just before turning the colour of strawberries. He literally collapsed on the carpet, holding his breath as if suffering a heart attack. One of the imaginatively dressed waitresses came over to his aid, thinking he was choking. He recovered. Aye, he recovered all right. He recovered to exact his revenge on me for all the slagging I had ordained him with during my tenure in the store the previous years. He announced that our great manager, Houdi, the omniscient, the master of communication, the master of change, the hygiene store manager of the year, the property developer, didn't know the difference between a tapas bar and a topless bar. What a fall from grace. What could I do? I dished out simple lashings to my colleagues on discovering their misdemeanours and idiosyncrasies. I just bowed my head and absorbed the punches like Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle, if you remember that. Similar to George Foreman 50 years earlier, I left the arena defeated, knowing this story would be circulating in every branch, at every water cooler and canteen for the next week. Ah well, I thought, some you win, some you lose. Take it in the chin. Well, I wanted to believe that. I turned on the CD player in my Honda Accord. Did I tell you it was a new diesel model? As the motorway signs faded into the rear-view mirror, Brandon Flowers told me, "Smile like you mean it."
Houdi, thanks so much for the laughs. I had to look up the tuberous bush cricket, by the way. I'll leave that to yourselves to educate yourselves. David Attenborough would be proud. And that's it for this podcast. You can keep up with all our upcoming events and themes by having a look at our website, 10by9.com. 10by9 is on the socials, naturally. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook and or Instagram. And you can get in touch via email at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. I love hearing from you. Thanks to everyone who helps make 10by9 happen. Leanne, Margaret, Chris and Cara. Thank you for your support. I couldn't do it without you. Thanks to the amazing team at the Black Box Belfast Best Venue. Thanks to the fantastic 10by9 audience. You make everyone feel so supported. And thanks to all the people who have shared their story at 10by9, but this week especially Richard Brown, Bob Salisbury and Houdi McCabe. I'm Paul Dorn and I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye-bye.